Hello, amazing watercolor card artists. I'm here. I'm going to show you how I make a custom watercolor palette, or like a DIY watercolor palette. I use a whole bunch of fun little palettes that I take with me, and I wanted to kind of take you on this journey. Here's my best friend watercolor palette. It looks kind of rainbowy-ish because it's totally indicative to my style. I love it. I have been using these colors for almost, oh my gosh, probably 5 years. For sure 5 years. And they never let me down, and I just love having this customizable watercolor palette that I can just keep filling. I've been filling these wells for 5 years, and you can tell that they're a little bit used up, but that's the fun of it. So come along with me. I'm going to share why you might want to use a watercolor, a traveling watercolor palette, or customize your watercolor palette, different ways to do that, and then ultimately you get to decide what works for you. So it's going to be an awesome lesson on different watercolor palettes and the customization that can go along with it. Benefits to customizing your watercolor palette. First, you get freedom and customize and savings costs. So what I mean by that is I can buy a full set of watercolor tubes, like this palette has all of my Mission watercolors, and I always seem to open it the wrong way, but this is my Mission watercolor palette, and so I have all of my Mission. I bought like 15 milliliter tubes, and I like using tubes, fresh paint, but when I want to just paint with Mission watercolor, I don't have to mess with opening the tubes, all the tubes up, and so I really get the best of both worlds. And then I can use them, I can take this with me wherever I go and just paint. And the same thing with this core watercolor. It was much easier to buy the tubes as a set and just put them all in a palette and enjoy it. And Core used to not make palettes with their watercolors, so this is a great way to kind of save money but also get like the best of both worlds. And so that's why I like using customizable palettes. Now those are two, like I just bought the set of watercolor tube and put them in palettes. What I've done with these, this one is my Schmincke granulating watercolors, and so I cherry picked the colors that I wanted and put them in a palette for my cards. And then I also have just a small bit of splint primaries to use with my granulating colors, and so that's a fun way to use it. So you know, you really don't have to buy the whole set if you don't want to. You can just buy a little bit at a time. This one is the same sort of system. I made a Daniel Primatic watercolor palette, and these are all the colors that I have in my palette. And so now when I want to just use minerals watercolor, I have a palette for that, and this is what it looks like, and it is so much fun to use. And I also can just open it. I don't have to worry about finding all the different tubes of paint. I just have it ready to go. And so that is another reason why I like to use watercolor palettes that I make myself. I couldn't go and buy this at the store. I curated it myself. I get a lot of freedom in doing that. Another good reason, and this is the palette that I'm going to share with you on how I made this palette, is that you can decide how many different primary colors that you want. Not from the company, you get to choose. So if you don't love Cad Red, which I can take it or leave it, I like Scarlet Lake instead of Cad Red, then you can put that in your palette. And you decide how you want to travel with your palette. So there's different palettes. There's a metal palette, there's a plastic palette, and so you get to decide. It's very customizable to suit your needs. You can take pans out, so I can take, let's say I've fallen in love with Cad Red. Now I can take Scarlet Lake out and put a new pan of Cad Red in its place. And then I'm not changing my palette, right? And so that's another wonderful reason why I like to make my own palettes. And you can just enjoy the fact that you have your own customizable palette, and then when you're ready to put it back in, you just push it in like that. A reason why you might want to go with a metal one instead of a plastic one. The metal ones are very durable. As you can tell, most of my palettes are metal, and I will often put stickers on them just to make them mine, make them fun. I mean, art should be fun, and if you are having fun, that's half the battle. I think I enjoy customizing my palettes, and I have little stickers that I've collected that I just like to put on there. Plastic watercolor palettes have a special place in my heart. I have learned to count the wells when I buy a palette. I'll count, because that's what you're limited to. This is another core watercolor palette that I absolutely love, and this has two sets of two paints. It has the high chroma, and then it has the landscape, and then it has the split primary. So there's three actual sets of core watercolor that I have used. So the high chroma, the split primary, and then the landscapes, and then I use a little bit of gold. I do not use this palette as much as I should, but it's still really fun. But I like plastic palettes because they don't catch me in the metal detector. I will often paint during the summer, and we go to a water park, and the water park, you have to go through a metal detector, and so I will swim for a little bit, and then I want to paint while my kids swim, and my kids are old enough to do that, and so I will sit and paint with this watercolor palette. It has all the colors that I need. I also added on the bigger wells, I added iridescent colors. I added purple, and then a purple iridescent, and it mixes a little bit, but I also, like, that's my style. That's how I like to paint. So I like plastic palettes for the metal detector problem, and then I don't ever have to worry about them stopping me, whereas if I used my palette that I use all the time, they would stop me and then be like, what the heck are you doing with this, right? And I don't really want to explain myself. So anyways, that's why I would use a metal or a plastic. They're a little bit bigger, but I also enjoy the fact that I can, it's a nice palette to use. Alright, some other things to think about when you're deciding on building your watercolor palette is, do you want half pans or full-size pans? Now, that might be a question you have to ask yourself. My whole thought process on why I have some full pans and half pans are the convenience factor. So with the full pan, I can get a 1/2 inch flat brush in these. I can't in the half pans. And so that is one reason. How big is your brush, and how much can you fit your brush into the pan? That's going to be the deciding factor for most reasons. Other factors might be if you're just using like a little round brush, then it doesn't matter what size. But if you like having a full pan, then get a full pan. I have some empty half pans, and an empty half pan will fill it up to, it's a 2.5 milliliter well, so it'll hold half a tube of small watercolor, or it'll hold about what 2 times as much with the full pan. So you would be able to get a full pan would do a full tube of 5 milliliter watercolor. I buy my watercolor in 15 milliliter tubes, and so you could fill up a full pan 3 times, or this 6 times. So that is a thing that you want to ask yourself. And I know that sometimes I'll buy smaller pigments in a 5 milliliter pan, and it does take up half a tube. So if you like to use fresh and dried watercolor, keep that in mind. But that's really the only difference, and this could easily be taken out. I could easily take out my full pan and replace it with 2 half pans. So that is another option that you could do. So now maybe I just need 2 smaller colors, and I could do that very easily and make that happen. So there's just lots of ways to customize your palettes. if you're looking to have like a plastic palette, again, I like knowing how much these would be considered full pans. I don't fill them up all the way. I will fill them up about halfway, and then I will actually fill them up like this, where there's a lot more paint here and then a little less here, so then I can have a spot for my water. And then I like using these wells to make my colors, and as you can tell, they are very well loved. You can get empty palettes. I got these also at Blick online, and there's a spot for your brush right here, or a pencil. You can also put a pencil right in here. It's a perfect spot for that. And then you would just buy these little wells, and you can buy them in half pans or full pans, and you would just put them in here just like so. And sometimes you have to move these a little bit, and they will fit, and you should be able to get, you can go all the way down. You can also add like a full pan, half pan, full pan, like however you need to customize it, you can. I will buy these often because sometimes I just want an empty watercolor palette to try out different colors on the go. And so this one was $3.99 at Hobby Lobby, so not terribly expensive. Like I said, there's cost savings to making your own palette. And there you go. So what I would do, I would fill these wells, and so I would have 10 colors, and then I would have my mixing area right here. I have found that when I put watercolor on these wells and then close it, sometimes the paint will fall. So I usually almost always know which way is up, and that way these things won't fall out because I only have pigment on that side. And you can kind of tell with this one is what I did right here. So I don't have any real pigment. Sometimes I will put a little dab of pigment on, but it's not going to make it much of a difference. Just another option or food for thought, I use old mint tins, and I put, this one has my Inktense watercolor in it, and it's just a little tin that I could put in my little purse if I wanted, with a couple of pieces of paper, and just take my art with me. I love having a small tin like this to have, and I can customize the watercolor pans, and it's so easy and so fun for on the go. So it doesn't have to be expensive, but it is so much fun to have a little container. And of course I have a sponge and a paper towel in it, and it won't move anywhere, and whenever I want to get it out and just paint, I can. Once you decide on a palette, then it's time to fill your palette with your watercolors, and watercolor right in here, and then leave a little bit for water. So it would be thicker right here. You can kind of see that it's angled a little bit, and so that's why I would say put your watercolor thicker here and then less right in here. If it's a full pan, you can just squeeze some in. I would not go over I would not overflow it. You do not want to have that mess. So this I just filled a couple of days ago, and so that's about as much as I filled. And this is the Quin Gold that I absolutely love, and it needed a place in my palette. I also just filled up Lunar Blue, which is a new favorite blue of mine, and so you can tell that I didn't fill it up all the way. I just filled it up mostly to the edge, and I'm okay with that. I would rather have less and fill up later than to have it overfilled, and then when you close it, it does not make a big mess on here, and you're not wasting paint that way. I like to swatch, have this color swatch. So what I did was I took this palette and I traced it with a pencil. I know, very scientific. And then I will cut, whoops, that must have been a fingerprint. Then I will cut inside of it And then I will then take a ruler and just kind of do my lines. And I know I need 7 on each side, I believe. Was it 7? And so I'll need 7 spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12. I'll need 12 spots. And then down the side. So honestly, I would just do half. And then this would be 3 and this would be 3. So this is a very simple sketch. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Half of this, and then do it into thirds, and then another third, and then I would write each name and then cut it out. But since I already did the work for you, I'm just going to show you a video of me swatching out each color in my palette so you know. Alright, so first is alizarin crimson. It's one of my favorite colors. I get a red, a cherry red, but I also can get a really pretty pink. Scarlet Lake is the next one. I replace that with cad red. I don't always love cadmium red. So Scarlet Lake is kind of a more subdued color than cad red, and I love it, and it's very transparent. Rose Madder is a cool red, and it almost has this pinky color to it. I just love it. Yeah. And then next is my beautiful brown madder, and it's a very warm red, almost an orange, but it's still in the red family in my opinion. Indian red is another favorite. It is red oxide if you use oils or pastels, and so it's a very known watercolor. And then I have transparent orange. Transparent orange is very transparent. It almost looks like it glows, and I can get some really pretty tonal value from transparent orange. Almost a yellow. And now cadmium yellow light is one of my favorites. I use this all the time for landscapes and for fruit. It's a beautiful, bright yellow, very cool. Daniel Smith quinacridone gold is gorgeous. It looks almost brown when you put it on the paper, but when you add a lot of water to it, you get this beautiful yellow. Iron oxide, burnt sienna, is very close to Indian red, but it has a bit more of a brown tone to it. Quin sienna has this beautiful earthy orange color that also can be almost like a yellow. It's just a gorgeous color. Yellow ochre is a staple yellow for me. I use this almost in every painting, and I go through tubes a year with yellow ochre. It is a beautiful color. I have lemon yellow, which is another cool yellow. It is perfect for sunsets and sunrises. I use it a lot in my winter landscapes. Whenever I want to do sun, I will use lemon yellow. Blick sap green is a staple. Any sap green is my favorite. I don't use it straight out of the tube. I usually add a yellow or a blue to it. Hooker's green is another like a sap green, but it has a bit more blue to it, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. It's very thick. You can get a lot of lush green. When I think of a lush green color, I think of Hooker's green, and so I use it a lot in my landscapes, but I usually have to mute it down with alizarin crimson to get it not so bright. And I also love it because I can lift it from, and it will look like, it's just a great color. Cascading green is from Daniel Smith, and it is a color that separates, and once I get some water on it, you'll see the beauty of it. It will separate into this turquoise color, which it's happening already. You can see on the paper just by adding some water to it, and it is one of my absolute favorites. Undersea green is quinacridone gold and ultramarine. So I do have those on my palette, but I don't necessarily always want to mix it. So I have the convenience color of quinacridone yellow and ultramarine, and you can see that granulation from ultramarine working with in the undersea green. So it's beautiful. Phthalo Turquoise is also a Daniel Smith color. It is by far my favorite blue for water and for lakes. Anything I'm doing with water, really. Seascapes also. But I love the liftability of it. It is staining, but there's a lot of beautiful textures you can make from it. Cerulean blue is like the less bossy of the blue, so if I need something light, I can. I make a lot of skies with cerulean blue, and it's just a staple on my palette. Now, ultramarine blue is a very like warm blue in my opinion, and it works really well for any kind of blue. It is very granulating. Before we had synthetics, ultramarine blue was made with lapis. Lunar blue has become a new staple of mine. It is made with Mars black and then ultramarine, or phthalo blue, sorry, Mars black and phthalo blue. And so you get this beautiful granulation and separation, and it's just one of those colors that I love. Indigo is another staple in mine. I use indigo a lot with sap green to get like the shadows on trees or the shadows in grass. I love using indigo in my landscapes. I use indigo for skies if I want a moody sky, and you can see how much tonal value I can get just from adding water. It's a staple in my palette, and it's been that way for years. And my last color is burnt umber. Burnt umber, and this is from Core. I do love Core watercolor. It's very thick, and a little goes a long way, but I love the tonal value that I get from this. I can get a really thick dark brown, and I can get very, very light, almost like a golden yellow. It's just perfect for landscapes and for trees and for natural things. And so those are my colors that I use in my palette. And lastly, if you love the idea of having your customizable, build your own watercolor palette, it is totally yours. Like, you can customize and have 24 awesome colors that like speak to you, right? And then you don't have to worry about hardly any other colors. You know that these 24 colors work, and they work well with each other. They have the color harmony that you love, and so keep it. Just use it and be happy. You don't need 100 colors to make beautiful watercolor paintings. I think 24 is more than enough. And then also, I am curious if you have any brand preference, or do you like the color choices that I chose in my Best Friend watercolor palette? And if not, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'll talk to you soon.